Well, I'm sure that many of you were just galvanized by the white smoke pouring out of the chimney of the Sistine Chapel of the Vatican today. And I got thinking about that as I listened to CBC radio on the drive up here, and I was thinking, wouldn't it be wonderful if we had a similar sort of chimney pouring out white smoke to give us all the solutions to water management in Alberta? I mean, think of the opportunity there and the things that would rivet us to that chimney. But maybe part of it is understanding our province a little bit better. And you know, when you think about something like describing something like a country or a province for that matter, that can be a daunting task. But yet, the arrogant worms. Anybody heard of the arrogant worms? Yeah, I'm good. I'm in an audience that understands this group. They're a musical comedy trio, and they really captured Canada. They have a song, and in the song it speaks of rocks and trees and trees and rocks and rocks and trees and rocks and trees and trees and rocks and water. Pretty cool in terms of Canada. So Alberta, by comparison, must be about rocks and trees and grass and critters. That's not exactly an advertisement from Alberta tourism, but it is the beginning of a journey that I'd like to take you on. Now, we think of the exotic when we want to travel. You know, Huck Finn and Tom Sawyer, they wanted to light out for new territory. And I think that's often what our propensities are when we think about travel. We want to rush out of the province to escape the cold, or because we think that there's nothing worthwhile, nothing scenic, nothing breathtaking to see at home. Let me disabuse you of that notion, and by taking you on a trip through Alberta's natural regions. And maybe, just maybe, if we spent some more time engaging with and enjoying the beauty of Alberta, we might like the province better, and we might treat it like we wanted to stay. So let's start with the Rocky Mountain natural regions. The mountains really are the backbone, maybe even the backdrop of Alberta. These landscapes provide us humility in a vertical context, especially when it takes some sweat equity to get up to those vantage points. Sometimes superlatives fail us when it comes to describing the variety, the beauty, and the grandeur of some of those mountain landscapes. These are the water towers, the places of heavy snowfall and rainfall where water is temporarily stored. What we downstream people drink starts here. Work backwards from your tap, and I'll bet you'll find yourself in a location that looks very similar to this. We celebrate the mountains. We celebrate them for their utility, but I think we also need to celebrate them for their mystique. The landforms are evocative, they're sinuous, and they're inviting. But make no mistake, we can never forget that this is a harsh environment, especially in the winter. Yet animals are adapted to this environment and that harshness. This ptarmigan, instead of going down in elevation in the winter, goes upslope to find bare wind-swept ridges. An interesting adaptation to winter. This campion has an adaptation to the lack of heat units at this elevation. Those heat units, of course, are necessary to produce seed, and so what it's done is created its own greenhouse to capture solar radiation, to allow it to capture heat, and of course produce seeds. Now, on the east side of this natural region is the montane. It's not mountains, it's a transition to grasslands. This is a place to watch the weather, particularly as it sweeps over those bordering mountains. It's a bit like being at a seascape. You can see the weather coming at you. If there is a place that sustainable agriculture is possible, it is here with a tradition of ranching and livestock grazing. The montane is the largest holdout for rough fescue. Rough fescue is, of course, our provincial grass. It's deep-rooted, it's drought-resistant, and it cures on the stem. Bison migrated annually from the grassland to winter on it, and now ranchers make good use of it to winter their livestock on it as well. We're all hoping for this, of course, the crocus, the signal of spring. Like other native plants and animals, it has rolled the storms, it has rolled the floods, it's rolled the droughts, it's rolled the range of natural variation into its genetic material. It was born here a long time ago, and I think it's a testament to that place that we call home. There is, of course, an outlier of the montane in the southeast corner of Alberta, in the Cypress Hills, and it shows you the diversity that this province has to offer. Next is the Foothills natural region, and this natural region extends north from the U.S. border, which is just on this side of Chief Mountain, in an ever-widening band to almost the Northwest Territories border. It's a rolling, partially timbered and grass landscape in the south, and as it widens west of Rocky Mountain House, it becomes more heavily timbered. It's a mixed wood forest with many water features. Some of Alberta's largest rivers flow through this natural region. This is the Little Smoky, one of the many tributaries to the Peace River. If mountains are the water towers, this natural region must be the rain barrel, a source of most of the water for northern Alberta. If there's one animal that possibly epitomizes this natural region, it must be the moose. And of course, moose are pretty much an animal built by committee. Now, my adopted home is the Grassland. In 1890, there was an editorial in the Medicine Hat News, and it said, amongst other things about the Grassland, it would be criminal to attract people here. Well, people did come, and they did settle, undeterred by the climate, and perhaps spurred on by the lie that they could make a living off a quarter section in the Grassland. One can imagine, though, especially after a spring of heavy rainfall, how the native grass must have tickled the bellies of bison. I think we can get that sense in some years. And for Aboriginal peoples, for native peoples, for who fat was fuel, the blooming of the golden or the buffalo bean signaled that bison cows were putting on fat again after a long winter, and the barbecue could begin again. And after that barbecue, perhaps they would inscribe a record of their hunt on the sandstone cliffs of Writing on Stone next to the Milk River. The grasslands, they're a tough place to make a living, and plants have evolved things that stab, sting, slice, and are prickly. Some say people of southern Alberta share those traits. It's a place where water takes on a much new and different perspective in your mind, and where the green next to water can seem like a lifesaver. The grasslands, to me, are a place where the tangible and the mythical overlap, especially on that rare morning when fog is below you. There are hidden places, like the Lost River. This is not the flat, featureless plain that grasslands are wrongly called. You cannot see your dog running away for 3 days. Eons of erosion have stripped the landscape down to the bone and have sculpted the bedrock into spherical forms in some special places. And again, to reiterate, the rivers are life-giving, but compared to the flows of northern rivers, are small by comparison. The emerald threads of green vegetation bordering rivers and wetlands or it's called the Riparian area, harbor a breathtaking number of wildlife. Rivers convey water across the natural region and deliver it to other provinces. And I think it's a reminder to us that Alberta is a water provider to those of us, or those people that live downstream. And so it conveys a certain responsibility. Now, sadly, there are more imperiled species in the grassland than in any other natural region. Some, like sage grouse, are hanging on literally by a feather and are dangerously close to winking out of existence. What you see is an antelope. What might not be evident is that you're looking at a living history book, an archive of the past. An antelope can run up to 100 kilometers an hour. And why? Their primary predators, coyotes, can only do about 2/3 of that speed, and only in burst intervals. It seems like over-engineering, doesn't it? Well, somewhere in the past, a predator like the cheetah of Africa stalked antelope on the North American plains. And antelope haven't forgotten the need for speed. This is just a personal gripe of mine, a little bit of a rant, but I think Alberta got cheated in the slogan department. Montana got big sky country, and Saskatchewan grabbed land of the living sky, but in Alberta and the grasslands, at dusk, we still have some spectacular scenery. Now to the parkland, where we are now. This is where I was born and raised. Of course, Alberta's floral emblem is something you'd recognize primarily from the parkland, but of course found throughout most of Alberta. But I'd like you to think about this. The Saskatoon is the more edible reminder of the natural region. In the parkland, the Rumsey block is the largest intact piece of the natural region. It's a natural savanna of grassland with aspen and willow donuts surrounding the wetter areas. The region is topographically varied. The neutral hills were an area where native peoples put their rivalries on hold, at least temporarily. And the region is not neutral. It's a tension zone. Based on moisture, trees and grass vie for position, and they march back and forth based on precipitation levels. Historically, wetlands were spread across this landscape and could hold up to 75% of spring snowmelt, and that was channeled into groundwater and fed streams and kept lake levels high. Sharptails are the native grouse of the parkland, a place defined by grassland with wooded islands. In 1941, it was reported that 4 hunters near Lac St. Anne in a week shot and canned 300 sealers of grouse. That's 7 grouse per sealer. Even with my rudimentary math, that translates into 2,100 grouse. So it gives one a sense of the cornucopia of resources that this province had within living memory. Other rivers flow through the region, but it's the Battle River that is really the Parklands River. It divided Cree territory from the Blackfoot, and it earned its name from the conflicts between those two tribes. And of course, in terms of diversity, there is an outlier of the parkland on the breaks of the Peace River. And then to the Boreal. The Boreal is said to be the lungs of the land. It's also the repository for a massive amount of carbon. The Boreal is circumpolar, so we share our portion internationally. It's a land of mixed woods, aspen, birch, and conifers. It's the destination for lots of critters like this, neotropical migrants, warblers. This warbler migrates from Central and South America to nest in the boreal forest. Here's a bird that weighs about 8 grams. 8 grams. Take 2 quarters out of your pocket and bounce them in your palm. That's about 8 grams. Half of that 8 grams is fat. That's the fuel tank. Now, these birds are remarkably fuel efficient. If they were burning gasoline instead of reserves of body fat, they would boast of getting 720,000 miles per gallon. But they still need stopovers to fuel up. And so it's the riparian areas, the rivers, the lakes, the wetlands, that these animals stop in, and they treat them like the 7-Elevens and the McDonald's of the world to gain that extra bit of fat to continue that migration to the boreal forest. Now, it seems to me that water in the boreal doesn't seem to want to leave, or it doesn't know where to go, because it doesn't seem to want to go there very quickly. But it very much is a land of water, including Alberta's largest lake, Lesser Slave Lake. Now, the boreal is more than mud and moose and mosquitoes. It's about scale, and it's about assets beyond what we currently export from. When you get down to it, what are Alberta's crucial assets? What are our treasures? Well, water's one of them, and I'm pleased that you're having a conference talking about water. Soil is another. This is the stuff of the glacial grinding of parent material influenced and modified by plants. Those assets, our treasures, also include biodiversity in the form of 90 species of mammals, 250 species of birds. And in case you're wondering why there are so few hummingbird down jackets on the market, hummingbirds have about 1,000 feathers per bird compared with Canada geese at about 25,000. So I think you can understand what the cost would be of a hummingbird down jacket. There are 50 species of fish, 20 species of amphibians and reptiles, about 1,750 species of plants, and frankly, an unknown number of insect species. In point of reference, compared to insect numbers, everything else is just rounding error. All these treasures fit into a matrix, a web of life that we call Alberta. And as Albertans, we've gained much value from these treasures, starting with my homesteading grandparents. But we've mined many of those assets, including the new coal formed under the rough fescue grasslands of the parkland, which took thousands of years to form. We've extracted water from many of our rivers to the point where some river reaches are hurting units because of lack of water. The vast timber resources of the Boreal are now controlled by multinational corporations. I'm sure they'll look after our assets well. Timber harvest of the industrial clear-cut model occurs in our headwaters, a place originally set aside for watershed protection. Have we strayed from that early and wise decision of protecting source water? The extraction of petroleum wealth brings into focus the issues of cumulative effects and fragmentation. Too many things happening too quickly on the same piece of ground. And with that rush comes invasive species like this crested wheat, ones that threaten the future health and productivity of our native plants and animals. We dig up the landscape, turning it wrong side up, and we do it to satisfy the new power demands from more lights, more TVs, more microwaves in the ever-widening sprawl of our urban centers. The costs mount, most visibly and alarmingly in terms of water quality. The visible effects of increased sediment loads from industrial use of our watersheds could be preventable, but we need the will to do so. The invisible assets, or the invisible effects on another asset, clean air, aren't as clear. And this leads us to a conundrum. Is it this? And I'll read it to you. This father is reading his Hummer manual, and he says, yes, the earth is getting hotter than ever, and yes, it's probably due to human activity. But I'll let you in on a little secret no other adult will ever tell you. We actually don't care about our child's future. Well, that's one option. And then there's this one. Two of the most important gifts we can give our children are the ability to use information to make wise decisions and a quality environment in which there are still decisions that can be made. And so I hope that that's the track we're on and the trajectory for Alberta and its other treasures. I wish you well in the rest of your conference, and thank you for the opportunity to accompany me on this little voyage through a place that I think is pretty spectacular. Thank you.